welcome back. Thanks again for joining us. Now, this particular story has been dominating headlines. The debt counselling industry has called on government to launch a high-level investigation into the National Credit Regulator to find out why it was not doing its job properly. Well, the DCI said that the NCR should be probed for not properly investigating African Bank. Tom Winterboer, who is PricewaterhouseCoopers Financial Services Leader for Africa, has now been appointed as a curator, and he will be responsible for African Bank with immediate effect. There has been some sort of a lifeline that has been thrown to African Bank, and let's discuss this a bit more. We're joined by Owen Senzangakhona Nkomo, who is the executive partner at Inkunzi Investments. A very good morning to you. Thank you so much for your time.
Good morning.
You and I were discussing this off air about whether or not African Bank and the industry as a whole has learned from this incident, or do you think it's a case of let's bail them out, let's rescue them, but the lessons have not been learned?
Look, I think if the lessons had been learned, we would not be at this stage. And I must actually start by commending the National Credit Regulator for having stepped in like 5 years ago with new regulations that sought to reduce the amount of reckless lending. And in fact, African Bank was recently charged for negligent lending by the regulator, and they paid a very big fee for that. So my view is that the National Credit Regulator can only do so much, especially with a limited budget when it comes to regulating such a very vast industry. Too many players and too many people needing applications on a single day. So how do you manage that kind of environment? You need more manpower. You need more skilled people to make sure they help out in the management of all the micro lenders in the country and all the banks as well that are actually responsible for lending money out. My take is the industry has been given enough guidance in terms of saying what should you do and what should you not do. So if African Bank had stuck, in my view, broadly to the bigger dictates of the NCR, I don't think they would have found themselves in this position. For example, you're not allowed to lend money to someone who does not afford to pay that liability back because they're overextended in credit and so forth and so forth. But unfortunately, African Bank continued to lend extensively, and this is why they're in the position they are in now.
So do you think that we're just dealing with the fruit or the manifestation of the issues and not the core problem when we bail out an organization such as African Bank?
Look, I think it's the right thing to do to bail out the bondholders of African Bank. If you know how investments work, the first people that take priority in any investment are the bondholders. Then you get the preference shareholders, and then you get the ordinary shareholders. So the government and the Reserve Bank is saying, let's give confidence to people that we promised by regulation that will protect them, who are the bondholders. Let's make sure that they are looked after. But if you take it a little bit further, then you realize that there's a whole lot more cracks in the system that needed to be taken care of. And African Bank, in my view, will continue to be a classic case of how the credit environment should not be managed. It's quite unfortunate what happened in this business.
Let's go back to the technical terms. I think we've gone ahead of ourselves. Yeah. That concept of curatorship.
Yes. Just
define it for us and let us know where we stand now with regards to African Bank.
Well, curatorship basically means that an individual or a business that has failed to manage their affairs or is showing symptoms that they cannot manage their affairs properly has to be taken over by someone who's been authorized by a court of law to take over their operations. And in this case, you see that Tom Winterboer from PwC is going to be looking after after African Bank rather. It means that the Reserve Bank does not believe that African Bank can fairly and reasonably manage their own affairs. So they need an independent person who's going to guide them through this current process where the bank is almost deemed to be unfit to operate. And his involvement in this bank is going to make sure that whatever is left for the bank to continue to collect will be collected. Any management decisions that need to be made independently will be made by Tom himself from PwC. And I think that hopefully he will also manage the process of trying to get the so-called good parts of this business, the good bank, back to the stock exchange so that previous shareholders in this company are going to have a chance to reinvest their monies.
Let's talk now about the people who have suffered somewhat because of African Bank's inability. I know pensioners, quite a lot of losses for them as well. But what does it mean for those who have investments or loans or who were somehow benefiting from African Bank? How are they affected and where do they go now?
Look, let me take this opportunity to clarify something here. to you and the viewers out there. African Bank at its peak probably was about 22 billion odd rands. And if you look at that business holistically as a part of the whole South African market, you'll realize that it was quite small to have made a very big dent in the pockets of the pensioners. It's just like a move in the stock exchange by probably maybe 0.2%. That's what happened to the bigger picture of the stock market, or rather the pension market in South Africa. However, the people that were affected the most are the direct shareholders and the BEE shareholders, Ayomhlaba and Hlumisa shareholders, who were probably number 3 or number 4 shareholders in this business, which means they held about 3 billion rands of stock in the business, and now they're sitting with nothing. So those are the people who have taken the very biggest knock in this whole exercise. And there's been talk about Coronation having been extensively invested in this business. Coronation manages about 570 billion rands in assets. And, you know, to lose probably about 5 odd billion rands, in my view, is quite, relatively speaking, it's a minute amount to concern ourselves about. But the bigger picture is to be learned about the economy and how we position ourselves in terms of lending money out there aggressively, and how the regulatory bodies must continue to be funded enough such that they can continue to monitor these businesses out there. Even the FSP is a classic example. Very big responsibility, but not enough financial support to make sure they manage this.
And of course, the top story in our business sector this morning, Debt Counselling Industry calling for government to investigate the National Credit Regulator. You, I know, are siding with the National Credit Regulator, saying they don't have many resources. We're going to have we have to leave it there, under-resourced. That's something we're going to have to continuously look at, and whether or not the intervention now will go a long way to making sure that we don't see a repeat of this. It's not something that's localized. It's happened all over the world. Unsecured lending. So you and I, when we go and borrow money from the bank, also think twice about whether or not you can afford it. Let's leave it there for now. Thank you so much for having joined us. That was Owen saying Nzanga Kona Nkomo. He is the executive partner at Inkunzi Investment.